Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Why Is This Dude Wearing a Helmet? As you can see since the last video, I've turned my bike into a cow. If you want to see what some actual cows thought of this bike, check out a recent video that I'll link at the end. But on with this video, this is just a basic maintenance video. There's a few jobs that I've been wanting to do, and I'm working in conjunction with wemoto.com to bring you this video. So let me show you the bits I've got and the things we're going to do today. Okay, there's 3 jobs to do today. One is to change the air filter. Wemoto said, why don't you try out one of these filters? I thought, why not? Because my one in there is filthy. So that's going to be a nice, easy one. The other job is the nuts on the back of my sprocket are a little bit old and chewy. So I've decided to replace those, and Wemoto have found these for me. I think they said that they didn't actually have them specifically in stock, but they have sourced them for me, so that's absolutely fantastic. And also an oil filter change, and they've sent me this, and I am 99% sure that that is the oil filter cover gasket. To take the rear wheel off this bike, obviously I'm going to need it to be on this paddock stand, but to do the oil change, I'm going to need it to be on its side stand. So I've decided that I'm going to do the sprocket nuts first, because that's actually going to be the more fiddly, tricky job, because getting this rear wheel with an oversized tyre off is, yeah. Excuse me while I just slip into something a little more orange. Right. First job, rear wheel off. I have these skateboard wheel sliders. These literally are skateboard wheels and a piece of threaded rod. My mate Jake the Garden Snake's actually got a video on making these. So if you're interested in something like that and saving quite a lot of money, try it. See? I wasn't kidding, they really are skateboard wheels. Okay, so now we need the big breaker bar to loosen this off. Let's keep these parts in my box. Axle just slides out. Now, I need to run it forward to get the chain off. And now, come backwards. I've got the spacers falling out. The caliper is now out of its run-up, but ah, God, yeah. Okay, got that out of the way for a second. Oversized tyres do not make it easy to get your rear wheel off. Okay, we should have, but there we go. Now we've got the wheel out. I basically had to remove the 2 bolts that stick out this side. And you might be saying, my God, that looks filthy. Yeah, it is. It's a Supermoto. It's covered in grease. It's protected. I should give it a proper clean at some point, but I'm just going to make it messy again anyway. This one's a bit chewy. This is why I'm replacing them. All these nuts are a bit soft and crappy. There's always one that just wants to give you as much trouble as it possibly can. Oh, no. There we go. And before I take the rest of them out, I'm going to compare one of the ones that Wemoto sent just to check that they are the right size. The shank on the original one is very slightly longer by about 2 mil, but that shouldn't matter. Overall length is the same. Yeah. Yep, they're going to work perfectly. So Wemoto, whatever you sent me, DRZ 400SM, spot on. So while I'm taking these out, huge thanks to my Patreon supporters. And that's the one that's probably stuck. If you want to help me continue making these videos, please consider joining. Information's all in the description below the video. Come on, you've only ever got to undo one more time in your entire miserable life. It's nice to be in the garage and take my helmet off for a bit. Okay, so the problem we have is these two, the nuts on the underneath, they're a bit soft, the metal's gone a bit soft, and the edges are just burring over and just munching up basically. I don't want to keep trying to... They're not that tight, they just need to let go. So, what would you normally do in this situation? Well, there's a few different things. Penetrating oil, like WD-40 or something like that. But these are actually locking nuts. So although that will help, I think I'm actually going to need to heat these up to get them off. This is why I shouldn't have put them back on. I knew when I put them back on last time, it was the last time they were ever going on, I was like, you shouldn't... I knew I shouldn't have done it, and I've caused my own problem. But anyway, so, heat. You can use a blowtorch and gently warm it up from the back, but obviously I'm going to be heating the hub of my wheel up quite a lot doing that, and I don't want to do that. I want to be more direct and, well, actually very high temperature. Now, this is something that not many of you are going to be able to do, but I do quite a lot of welding, and I have a TIG welder. And with this, I can heat that nut up in a couple of seconds, and hopefully get it hot enough that it'll loosen, and I can get a pair of mole grips on it and just get it to just crack off, because once it's released the pressure, it'll be easy to get off. You can use, there are different devices you can use for things like you can get sockets which sort of grab into the metal and undo it that way. I don't have any of those. If the worst comes to the worst, I'll just have to drill them out, but I don't want to do that because I think this will work, so yeah, might as well give it a go. Now, if you're getting confused by this, like, hang on a minute, if you weld it, surely you're never going to get them off. This is just a hot torch. When I weld with this, a TIG welder, I introduce more material myself. I've got this very, very low, so it's not going to be melting the steel. All it's going to do is just really heat it up. And when steel gets hot, it expands, and it should just release off enough for us to get it off, hopefully. Come on. Come on. You see that? Just let go. So I think I heated it somewhere around on this side, and that as that heat soaked through, it just loosened off. As you can see, these are just soft and munched. But that doesn't matter. They're out now. One to go. Now that's got some heat into it. You can see oil's burning off. Okay, let's see how this is going to be. When drilling bolts out, you have to make sure you go directly through the middle. You don't want to hit the hub. But I'm going within that size, and then I'll go up a size. We should be able to get it to snap. Always close your eyes when you blow out holes like that, otherwise you'll blow fragments of metal in your eyes. Okay, so that's close but still smaller, so I'm going to enlarge the hole a little bit more. I'm just sticking a drill bit into the hole, seeing and comparing it to another one, and you can see we've gone that much further, so we are just into the shaft of this, so we should be able to drill out larger again, and the head should fall off. Note, because of my oversized tyre, when this sits flat on the surface, the disc isn't actually touching the bottom, it's just the outside of the tyre, which is perfect. So I'm about to put a punch in this and give it a good whack and see if it breaks it. Which it has not. Bingo! Oh, I have to tap that through. There we go, so you can see how munched this nut was. and where is it? Yeah, here's where I was heating it up. I even melted the sides of the nut and it still wouldn't come off. That's not welded. Don't think that's welded. There's grease in here. There was no way that was going to weld. So that's why I went to drilling it, and as you can see, this went exactly as you want it to. So drilled the centre out smaller, bigger, paying attention to check the old bolt if you can get one of them out, and comparing that to the hole size that you have, and you just work your way in until you're very close, and then smack it with a punch is what I do, and donk! Head comes off, bolt pushes out. That obviously wouldn't work if this was threaded and it was actually threaded into the hub, but because this is a smooth, sided bolt with just the threads on the end, it meant that this worked great. If it was a threaded hole, you can still drill it out. If you're very accurate, you can be hopeful that you might actually get the outside of the bolt to unscrew and you get the threads out that way. Alternatively, you have to basically drill it out slightly larger and re-tap the hole. But this is getting a bit advanced for basic maintenance. But these things you do come across. Okay, so just pop those in. And these nuts are locking nuts. If you notice, it's got like a little flange. Basically, that means as you screw it on, that's going to wedge into the side of the bolt and really clamp it in place so it doesn't vibrate loose. A byproduct of that is you can't actually do these up by hand, as it were. You can only get them to where that flange starts to touch the bolt. Obviously, if you're doing this on your bike and you've got the time, it's a great opportunity to clean everything up because you can get to everything. I'm not doing that because I'm filming. I don't have long. I actually have about 2 hours to get this job done. I didn't need to come into problems. But yeah, that's why I'm not cleaning up. I'm not tightening these up. I'm just basically getting it till the nut touches the back. And then we'll do them up in a star pattern so we get a nice even pressure amongst all of them. Right, there are torque settings for these, but I don't actually have a tool that I can attach to my torque wrench to be able to do that. So I'm going to use my experience and mechanical sort of sympathy is what I call it, which basically means when people who've done a lot of work on bikes say do something up taff or tight as flip, you know to do it up really tight, but we don't mean do it up until the point that the thing snaps. It's something that you learn. So I'm going to do this by sort of feel, but I'm still making sure that I do them up in like a cross pattern incrementally. So a little bit, corner to corner. Okay, so now I've done the star pattern and got them all reasonably tight. I run round the outside in a sequential order so I can guarantee I don't miss one. I'm just giving them that last little nip. You could mark them so you make sure like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 you don't forget one, but I just stick this. Well, there we go. Good riddance to the old mushy horrible bolts. Hello, nice new ones. This is a good example of preemptive maintenance. Yes, these were working absolutely fine holding this on, but the longer I left them, the harder they would have been to get off. So now I know I've got nice new hardware on there. It's not going to be a problem to get it off next time. And also next time I'll be more prepared and I won't go, oh, I'll just stick them on for this time because, well, you saw what we ended up having to do. Don't worry, we all take shortcuts occasionally and we normally pay for it. I forget it has that tray under there. I'm making my life easier to get this rear wheel back on by actually removing the chain guide to get it in. Okay, so let's lift that out the way. I've actually removed the chain guide because this is not an easy wheel to get back in on your own. Also removing the disc protection because that's just going to get in the way. Don't be afraid about taking pieces off to get something back together. It might be annoying. It might take you an extra 5 minutes to take all the bits off, but you might save 15 and not faffing. Okay, we got one side in. That's the hardest thing to do. Okay, so we've got it in on this side, we've got the spacer in, that's correct. Spacer's in, this is correct, this goes on. Ideally, again, with this one, you want to make sure it's torqued up to the right settings. Again, I don't have a tool that goes this large. My torque wrench is quite small, so I only really use it on engine casing bolts. So again, I do it to what, to me, seems right and has worked for me. Which would be that. It's like tight and then a couple of little airs. Just reinstall the chain guide with its nuts behind. Well, there we go. The sprocket's being held on by some nice new bolts. Everything's back in place. I will give the disc a clean off because I may have touched it with my greasy hands at some point. I've got some brake cleaner. I'll just spray it with that and wipe it down. But yeah, that is done. Let's do an easy job because that was a pain in the butt. Okay, so air filter. This is one that Wemoto sent me. The one I've got and I've always used is being a sponge type. Like this. Yeah. So, I wonder how this one attaches. So yeah, stainless steel mesh, extremely lightweight, deep air induction, 200 blah blah blah. It's just basically a washable filter. Well, I'll give it a go. I don't mind. So this should, in theory, just go in. Why did I say that? Oh. Or in. Fits over. And there we go. Easy peasy job. Wemoto, can you get white DRZ plastics? Mine are old and scratched, although now it looks like a cow. I kind of like it. I will note, this structure inside the old air filter, you need to keep that because you just changed the piece of foam. So if you do buy one of these, don't throw away this bit because you'll need it if you decide to go back to a foam type. Okay, the last job, do an oil change. Now, I must explain, this bike is a bit different to a lot of bikes because most bikes keep all their oil in the engine. This bike keeps some of it here and some of it in the frame. I'm not kidding. It's called a dry sump. So this probably won't be much like your bike, particularly if it's a 125. Thankfully for you, it's much simpler. It'll be one nut underneath the engine and that is it. On this change, I'm going to be changing the oil filter, which is in here. You should do that really every time you change your oil. Some might go 2 changes before they change the filter, but they're not expensive. It's good for your bike to change them every time, so do it. The one thing you need to keep in mind though is that if you change the oil filter, you normally have to use about 100 mils more oil because it's going to absorb it. So the first thing I need to do is undo the main drain plug underneath the bike. I highly recommend these things. It's basically a drain pan which is also a container. So you have a little bung that you take out here, you put it under the bike, it drains into here, then you can do it up and then you can take that to your recycling place and you can pour it into their tanks. Great thing. When I do an oil change, I've always warmed the bike up very slightly before I've done it. So just run it for a couple of minutes, let it sit for a minute, and then dump the oil out. Hello! Right, so we've run the engine for a couple of minutes, I've let it sit for a couple of minutes, and now I'm going to undo the sump plug. You'll need to know which plug is your sump plug. Look at your manual. I've put the bung just loosely in the hole so I don't lose the bolt because I'm going to let it drop. Nasty. Oh no! So if this is a bike with just one drain plug, that's all you have to do. Release that plug, drop the oil, and then put the new oil in. You should also undo the oil cap, but I haven't done that because I'm going to do that when I empty the top one. So my oil fill point is up here on the frame. Yours will probably be down there on the engine. So if you don't believe me, I even have a little dipstick. Okay, so now we need to take the oil filter off. There you go. It will slowly drip out. You have to stand it up every now and then. But you do want to try and get as much out as you possibly can. Never start your engine with no oil in it. Just don't do it, okay? Okay, so on this bike there is also a drain plug underneath the oil filter here. Just undo that. So that's draining out the oil filter. So now I can take the side off. And notice these aren't that tight. Like I can hold it from the top end of the socket. My hands went oily. And undo it. They don't need to be done up really tightly. Oh, did you see? Oh, you didn't see it. It fell and it landed and somehow stayed up there. I do think they should put a wire mesh in these. Anyway, cap off. And yeah, there's our O-ring they've given us to replace. So that's good. Which actually belongs in the lid. And there's our oil filter. That actually doesn't look too bad. There's not a lot of sludge or anything in it. I'm quite pleased with that. But it's good to get a new one in. So just chuck that there and let that drain as well. I've still got one more oil drain point to do on this bike, which is around the front of the frame there. But this is all drained out now. And I'm going to leave the bottom one empty. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace the filter and this seal now. Okay, so I'm just going to give this a bit of a clean off with some brake cleaner. Okay, so that's now nice and clean. So what I'm then going to do is I'm just going to open one of my bottles of oil. I'm just dripping some of this into that groove. And also rubbing it on the new O-ring. Because basically O-rings seal better when they've got a bit of oil on them. Okay, so then we just run that down into the groove so it actually sits in there. There we go, nice new seal ready to go in. Oil filter. Now this is just something I do, and I've always done, is I put a very small amount of oil on the filter, just literally up. Just to let it start wicking up the oil. And you'll note there's a hole in the back of it, and that goes in here over that little spigot which has got an O-ring on it as well. So that just goes in there. Then we get our cover, which has got a marking pointing up, so we know which way to put it back on. Okay, so I can now put the oil filter sump plug back in. Again, if you're new to doing this stuff, torque settings are your friend because it will stop you making any mistakes. I'm not concerned that I'm going to over-tighten things. Whenever you're doing anything up that goes around something, you do it incrementally. So bit by bit by bit. See, I'm literally just nipping them. They won't come undone. A lot of sump plugs will have a little magnet on them. This is basically just to hold on to some bits if anything happens inside the engine. And it helps you diagnose if you've got any problems going on. Don't worry if you have a little bit of sludge that kind of half sticks to it. That will happen. I've always found that to be the case with engines. You always have a tiny bit. It's if you have big lumps of stuff, that's when you want to be properly concerned. But do clean it off. Okay, on your sump plug, you're going to have a washer. This is a crush washer or a type of washer which basically helps seal it. Now, you should replace these every single time, but if you don't over-tighten them, you know, you do it the correct torque setting, you can use them a couple of times. So I'm going to use it again for this one. It's not been crushed really, it's still pretty straight to be fair. So yeah, I am going to be doing that. But if you have forethought, get a new one. They're only a few pence. I'm just putting the sump plug back in, but I'm not actually doing this one up tight yet, because I want to drain the front one and then just make sure nothing continues to come down this way. My drain pan isn't long enough to reach both holes. Okay, it's hard for you to see, but right here at the bottom of the frame is another sump plug, which I have undone. But here's a trick. You keep positive pressure pushing it into the hole and undo it, and then at the last second, pull it out. As you see, there is a lot of oil in there. There we go. Okay, well, I let it drain so it stopped dripping. I've now put both sump plugs back in, tighten those up. Again, there are torque settings for that. It's very important to make sure you get these right, because obviously if one of these came loose, say the front one, while I'm riding, it's going to dump at least a litre of oil directly in line with my rear wheel. It wouldn't be a fun time. Okay, so as I mentioned, this is my oil fill point. You will not have one up here, most likely. Yours will be down on the side of your engine. Funnel really helps me here. Now, the oil that you need will be in your manual. It will remind me written on the side of the bike, but these are the numbers you need to be concerned by. I need 10W40. This is 10W40. This is a semi-synthetic. Christ, get your teeth in. The total quantity you need varies depending on what bike you have, so you'll need to look in your manual again to get the answer to that. I know this takes about 1.8 to 1.9-ish litres, but what I'm going to do is basically dump in about 1.5 litres, and then I'm going to start checking the oil level, and well, you'll see. So the first thing is get the first litre in. My funnel is a bit dusty. Sorry, I just went and cleaned my funnel. It wasn't clean enough for me. Right, there we go. First litre is going in. Slowly, slowly. I've never used RHOK oil before. Be interested to see how this goes. A good tip would have been look under the bike while you're filling it, just to make sure that you haven't forgotten to put something like the sump plug back in. If you do, oh god, I could just imagine that. Go on, admit. I've never actually done it myself, like taking the sump plug out, draining the oil, then putting the new oil in without putting the sump plug back in. Right, there's about 1.5 litres. Another 100 mils. Okay. So I'm going to let that sit for a second. Okay, so dipsticks. This is a subject of its own. Depending on what bike you have, when you check your dipstick, sometimes you'll need to have the bike on a centre stand, or sometimes you'll need to have the bike on a side stand, or with some of them you have to screw it in, and with some of them you don't. So you're going to again have to check your manual for your individual bike, and the routine that you have to go through to check it. With this bike, it's like many bikes, you have to basically run it, let it sit for a minute, and then check the oil level. I just want to see if I'm registering. Okay, well that's registering way over, but I know that when I start the bike it's going to suck a ton of it through. I know I haven't got enough oil in there yet, but I know that I've got enough that no damage is going to be caused. So what I'm going to do is just start the bike up quickly. No revving. Okay, I just ran it for literally 30 seconds. I just want to get it pumping oil through. And now the level should have dropped. Yep, we went from being way over to being halfway up the stick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick another small glug in. And now I'm going to do a proper oil check. So basically I'm going to run the bike for 3 minutes without touching the throttle, just start it. And then after 3 minutes you switch the engine off, wait 3 minutes, and then I can check my oil level. If it's correct at that point, then my oil level is correct. Although after the first ride or two, I tend to just keep an eye on it just to make sure that there wasn't any big air bubble somewhere that's sucked up an extra 50 mils. It doesn't really matter. You're not going to cause huge engine damage if you're like 20 mils off of what you should be, but do it the best you can, eh? Oh god, it's just starting to rain. Go. Quick, quick, before the heavens open. Okay, so we clean it off, dip it in, take it out. Yeah, we're not showing anything on the dipstick now, which was to be expected. Because that oil filter is going to have sucked up a load of it. So we gave it a minute, see where it's at now. Halfway up the stick. So I left it again. And now we're showing just at the fill line, which is fine with me. Basically, again, depending on your bike, you're going to have markings on it. This is the low oil mark, this is the high oil mark. So as long as it's in between here, well, you know, above the halfway mark, it's okay. But I like to keep mine on the line, so it's got plenty in there. You don't want to overfill your bike though. So Derek is even more tip-top than he was before. Huge thanks to Wemoto.com for helping with this video again. I'm running out of jobs to do here. Not really. I'll be talking to you soon, Wemoto. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please do leave a like on this video if you found it interesting or useful. Subscribe to my channel if you like this sort of stuff. I do a vast variety of different things, motorcycle related and engineering, tool shop stuff. You might enjoy the content. Check it out. And of course, a huge thanks to my patrons for the massive support that you give this channel. Thank you. Right, I'm going to get inside because it's about to rain. Bye-bye. If you enjoyed this video and the other content on the channel, please consider following the links in the description to show your support.